Okay, so today we're diving into something that I think is pretty important, and that's this big drop we've seen in the stock markets
Yeah.
in both Europe and the
Mhm.
U.S. And it all seems to be connected to these new tariffs that have been announced and put into place. And we've got a bunch of news reports on this,
Yeah.
and we're going to try to make sense of it all for you. Like, what's the immediate impact? What are some of the potential reasons why the market is reacting this way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just right off the bat, when you look at these reports, the thing that really jumps out at you is just how huge the market's reaction has been. I mean, European stocks overall, something like a 4% drop.
Wow.
And that's not even the whole story. We saw similar and even bigger drops in markets all over the world.
Yeah, the Pan-European Stoxx 600, which for those of you who might not know, that's an index that tracks a whole bunch of European companies.
Mhm.
Well, it fell by 4.1%. And then over in Germany, the DAX index also down 4%.
Mm.
And to really help you grasp how big of a deal this is, that weekly loss for the Stoxx 600 was the worst it's been in 5 years.
Yeah.
Like the last time we saw a drop this steep was right at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
So this wasn't some kind of slow and gradual decline. This was a very sudden and sharp downturn.
Exactly. And from what we can gather from these reports, it seems like the thing that really set this whole thing off was when President Trump announced those new tariffs, what he called reciprocal tariffs.
Right.
And I think the thing that really caught the market off guard was that these tariffs on imports from some of the U.S.'s biggest trading partners, they seem to have been a lot more extensive than anyone was expecting.
Yeah.
And, whenever you have those kinds of unexpected policy changes, that's often what really shakes things up in the market.
For sure. It definitely created a ripple effect of worry. And you can see in the news that everyone's immediately concerned about this escalating into a full-blown trade war. Like almost as soon as the announcement was made, China came out and said they were putting 34% tariffs on U.S. goods.
Wow.
And the EU has also said they're ready to retaliate if negotiations don't go well.
Yeah.
So you can see how these initial actions could easily spiral into a back and forth of more and more trade barriers.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for people to understand that, these tariffs, they don't exist in a vacuum. They have very real effects on some pretty major players in the global economy.
Yeah.
Like these reports point out that even the biggest U.S. tech companies, this so-called Magnificent Seven,
Yeah.
they lost over $1 trillion in value in a single day.
It's hard to even imagine.
It's a staggering amount of money. And I think it really highlights how interconnected all these global financial markets are and how policy changes in one area can have consequences that reach far beyond that.
Oh, absolutely. And this wasn't just limited to Europe and the U.S. either.
Hmm.
I mean, if you look at what happened in the Asian markets overnight, especially in China, it just reinforces how global this reaction really is.
Yeah.
And another thing that stood out to me was how high these tariffs are that are being imposed on countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Sri Lanka. I mean, we're talking about 40 to 50%.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that these countries play a really critical role in international supply chains.
Right.
Which means these tariffs could cause some pretty big disruptions in how goods are produced and moved around the world.
Right. And it really begs the question, what's the end goal here with these tariffs? Because while the immediate market reaction has been undeniably negative, these reports include a statement from President Trump where he says that sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something.
Oh, interesting.
And to me, that kind of suggests that, at least from his administration, the perspective, these short-term market pains are seen as a necessary step towards achieving some sort of long-term economic benefit.
Yeah.
Whether that actually plays out that way, well, that's another question.
Okay, so for you listening at home, I think the main takeaway here is this really quick and really strong negative reaction from stock markets all around the world. And this reaction came immediately after these new tariffs were announced and implemented.
Yeah.
And it's clear that there's a lot of concern about this turning into a full-blown trade war and all the knock-on effects that could have on international economies and these really complex global supply chains we've been talking about.
Exactly. I mean, the sheer speed and the wide reach of this market downturn really show you how sensitive investors are to these kinds of shifts in trade policy and how much potential there is for things to destabilize the global economy.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something for you to think about. Given how interconnected global markets really are, how might these tariffs, which might seem isolated at first, actually create ripple effects that impact all sorts of industries and even us as individual consumers in ways that we might not even think about right away?
Yeah.
And beyond just looking at how the stock market is reacting, what are some other signs we could keep an eye on to get a better sense of what the long-term consequences of these kinds of trade policies might be?
That's a really good question. Something to ponder for sure.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
See you then.
Bye.